Hello and welcome to the Spinal Cord Injury Model System Forum. My name is Jeannie Hoffman and I'm a rehab psychologist here in the Department of Rehabilitation Medicine and a co-director of the Northwest Regional Spinal Cord Injury System here at the University of Washington. The forum, our video recordings, and all of our online media content are made possible by a grant from the National Institute on Disability and Rehabilitation Research. Tonight we have a fantastic panel of experts talking about parenting with a spinal cord injury. We have 3 individuals and 1 spouse, which was wonderful that Becca brought her husband Jared. We also have Joe and Clark, and each one of them has a really unique and interesting story. And by all means, we certainly know we're never going to capture all the different ways of people and parents and how they approach things, but we thought that we would start with this group of folks. So please join me in welcoming our panelists. And how we're going to do this is I'm going to start by talking to them to begin with, and then we'll open it up for audience questions at the end. So thank you and welcome. All right. Welcome, everybody. I want to start first, maybe we can just kind of go through. And Clark, can you just tell us basically how long you've been injured and a little bit about your injury and yourself?
I've been injured 34 years. C5-6 tetraplegia. Been married 26 years and have kids 21 and 16.
Great. All right, Joe?
I've been injured 9 years. I was injured when my 2 daughters were 2 and almost 5. I'm C4, Asia B, incomplete. I was living in Southern California with my wife and daughters when I had my accident, and we moved up here while I was still in rehab to be closer to family after my accident.
And Becca?
My name is Becca, and I was injured in 2009 when I was in the hospital to have my first child, and now our kids are 5 and 2 years old.
Yeah, and your level of injury?
T6.
T6, all right. So Clark, I'm going to kind of gather more information from you. You have been married quite a while, and you got married after you were injured. Did you and your wife talk about having kids at that point before you even got married or after you got married?
You know, we definitely talked about it, and I think that, and we were both like just optimistic, and I'm incomplete injury as well, and so we just kind of assumed, and when it got down to like brass tacks, can you really have kids or not, then there was a little bit of worry for a while, but yeah, it kind of went that way. Yeah.
Did you think about or talk about kind of how you would manage parenting given your level of injury?
Definitely. I mean, it was pretty much known she was going to be the main caregiver, just physically not able to lift the baby up and change diapers. And I mean, I gave it a shot a few times. Those are stories to be told. And the biggest one is that I tried, the little guy pooped, and it was like, she just left, so how am I going to, well, still not sure who had more on him after I was done, me or him. But no, we definitely talked about it, and she was the main caregiver for sure. Yeah. And we knew that was going to be the case. And she actually took 7 years off work after my second child was born, because they were close enough in age and she wanted to be around. At that time he would just start in kindergarten and she was newly born. So
after you had a first child, was there any question that you would have a second, or did you even blink an eye at that?
There was no question she was going to get a girl, so the boy was first. So.
Yeah. So you could have ended up with quite a number of children then.
Yes, yeah. It could have gotten ugly. No, it'd be great. But no. But it took longer. I mean, it was right away for the first one, and it took 3 years of practice for the second one.
And tough practice.
Yeah,
I
it's tough.
feel for you on that. So at what point did you, I mean, so early on when you weren't physically able to do as much with the kids, what role did you take in terms of kind of parenting and how did you guys kind of divide things up?
Well, you know, mostly, I mean, it would be running to the store. You know, if she needed stuff, I do drive, and so I can go and do those sorts of things. We were very fortunate to have some parental help around that could come in and help kind of keep the house clean and stuff, because that's another thing that with my injury, I can do a mean broom, but that's about it. So it's like and so really was more just being there for her once they're down, just letting her rest. You know, if they wake up, I can go and see if it's something simple. But really, it was pretty high maintenance for her the first few years.
So at what ages did you start kind of being able to be more directly kind of involved?
Probably when they could start climbing up on my lap, which was fairly early, maybe about 18 months, 14 months. I mean, as soon as they could stand up next to me, I could get them underneath their crotch and pull them right up onto my lap. And if I was in my manual chair, then they would just wheel around. From my power chair, it was go faster. So it just depended. But then I could really start helping out a lot more, and it was probably at a point when they understood, what kind of don't do that meant more, and that there was also that trust, both for me and my wife, that they would, and that they would be safe. So it really came about when they're safe, to where she can run and go somewhere and not have to worry that they're not going to be safe if they got into a situation that, behind doors or under tables or in a light cord or something. You want them to know that they can't go and do those things and know that they're not going to. Right. So there's a lot of planning, I think, that had to take place in that regard. And trust even with my wife and I to know, because she'll tell you I'm always one to take on maybe a little more than I should. So she would go, really? And I go, yeah, I can do this. So.
Yeah. So you would say that, she would say, really? And then she'd, give you another few months and then maybe.
Or we would talk more about it.
Yeah. So problem solve through things and kind of figured out what you needed to do. Yeah. So once they were that age and able to kind of mind, basically, it sounds like they were able to respond to you and do what you were asking them to do. Did you ever have any tough situations when they were young?
Oh, yeah. The worst one was, it's like he was probably 2. My son was 2, and he had one of these little cars that he would jump on top of. And he could either push it or he could get onto it and then pedal with his feet. And we're out in our cul-de-sac, and he decided, I go that way. And so I thought, yeah, okay, go that way. And I'm wheeling slowly after him. Well, he really went that way, and then he went that way in towards the street. And I wheeled as fast as I could and got to the corner just as he was going into the street, and I just yelled as loud and ugly as I could, and he stopped. And so did all the cars. He's right there. So it was extremely scary. I don't think I told her about it for a week or so.
You were more afraid you were getting into trouble? Or?
Yes. But literally, it was like, okay, the neighbor drove into the driveway, and my son was freaked out as well at that point. He was on my lap, but we were just kind of sitting there like, okay, because this hill is also one I could barely push up myself. So with him on my lap, so anyway, he came and got us back up to our house, and yeah, that was very scary.
Yeah.
Clark stopped thinking he could do as much at that point.
Yeah. So after that, you kind of re-evaluated your safe plan.
Yes.
No cul-de-sac playing, I bet.
But once he was 2, 3, and a lot of it too was like where I could unbuckle him from his car seat and that sort of thing. Then I could take him with me and go places, and that would give her time just to rest and take a break, or go with her girlfriends and do something other than mommy stuff. And so that was real important. I tried to plan those things, whether it was a drive to go see a friend or go see my parents or something like that. So, and even to the store once he is a little bit older, things like that.
When you had your second, your first was about 5, you said?
5.5.
Was your older one kind of helpful with the younger one with you?
Yeah.
Were you able to kind of be with her a little bit earlier alone?
Absolutely, yeah. Especially once, she was, kind of toddling and stuff, but, those first few months, of course, she was breastfeeding, so I wasn't helping there.
Right. You weren't able to intervene on any of that, just getting in the way on that one. Yeah. So once they were kind of old enough to kind of be able to go with you and do things, do you feel like there was things that were different about being a parent with spinal cord injury?
I mean, certainly yes, but I don't think it stopped me from doing stuff once they were older, and I don't think it stopped them from wanting me to do stuff with them. So I think at certain point it just gets to be their kids. They have a mind of their own, and you just direct them, just like anyone else.
Yeah. You mentioned that you had some family help. Did you kind of talk to them ahead of time too to know that they were going to be part of the plan, or was that just a kind of a given?
It was just kind of a given. I mean, and not that it was an expected given, but that's how they were. They were going to be around. They wanted to see their grandkids.
And were they always a big help?
Oh yeah, definitely.
So was there ever a time when your wife was like ill that you needed to have folks step in, or times when she was out of town?
No, not so much.
You just kind
But
of
they
planned.
were available. I mean, we were very fortunate. I mean, they were available like they would early on, as soon as, they were done breastfeeding. It was no problem for them to take one or both overnight. So we were very fortunate to be able to like have a date night or a night to ourselves, stuff like that. So we were real fortunate that way.
Yeah. Any things you feel like you missed out on?
I was telling Chris even this earlier, I think I was big into sports, and so probably if anything was like being able to do that throw the ball thing and run around the fields and stuff like that. I think probably I missed that more than they did, because they still did those things, but maybe they would have done it more. I don't know. I mean, my son he's more of the cerebral, computer geek, game playing kid, and my daughter is the outgoing, plays any sport she can, and so that's just different kids, I think. So, and I was again being able to drive, was able to take them, so I didn't get out of taxi duty.
Yeah. So that was the number one role.
Yes.
And happy to do it, right?
That's right.
So anything about parenting older kids that has been different? Did your kids go through the usual teenage years of not really wanting you around, or?
Yes and no. We're pretty tight-knit, but I mean, certainly they have their moods. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think it was pretty normal that way.
Did you ever feel like your kids were bothered by your disability?
No, not at all.
So never commented about it? Their friends never commented about it?
No, I mean, their friends, like, I didn't know your dad was in a chair, but didn't change anything.
Right.
They did not come over the next time. So I think they're okay. So yeah, no, I don't think it ever made a difference at all in that regard.
Yeah.
They weren't embarrassed by it.
Right. That wasn't the embarrassing part, just
Right.
sometimes if you were there.
Exactly. said, what? Do you know what you said last night, Dad? No, what did I say?
Excellent. All right, Joe.
I totally agree with that. It's not that you're in a chair that's embarrassing, it's that you are their parent that's embarrassing.
So you had kind of a different situation of being the stay-at-home dad with two young daughters. What was the switch for you? Because obviously being the kind of primary parent, you were pretty hands-on. And then after your injury, how did that shift?
Well, it was huge change because I wasn't obviously able to do that physically anymore. So we really very quickly had to find childcare because my wife was working. I mean, got a job even, or switched jobs after my injury, and we moved up here. So yeah, we got an au pair for a year and a half. We had nannies, we had neighbors, we had babysitters, we had neighborhood childcare, whatever we could cobble together for a couple of years until they were finally old enough to be able to minimally take care of themselves, and we're back under voice control again, and they weren't in imminent danger of getting themselves into trouble. So yeah, it was a huge change, but there would have been, no way that we could have maintained me as obviously. I was still having enough trouble just adapting to my injury for, as most people say, at least a good year, just trying to figure out everything about the injury and the new life, as it were. So yeah, it was a huge change because I couldn't do the physical anymore.
Yeah. Your oldest daughter was about 5 when you were injured. Does she have any memories of the injury or what happened or that big change?
She remembers when we used to live in California and our old house, and she remembers walking Dad and some of the stuff we used to do. And I was pretty outdoorsy. We lived up in the mountains. So I would snowshoe and backpack, and I was injured motorcycle riding. That was my big hobby, passion. So she was, she knew all about all of that. So yeah, she definitely has some memory of me before the injury. My 2-year-old at the time, no, she doesn't remember at all.
She just knows you as Dad in the wheelchair?
Yeah, pretty much. And I think, I didn't even really remember. My wife was pointing out that, she did the typical pick-me-up daddy when I came home, and I couldn't do it. And that was obviously really difficult. But I've got some great pictures of the two of them on my lap, and we're all like screaming and giggling madly as I got the joystick slammed to the stop, and we're cruising down the sidewalk. So we used to call it, let's go on an adventure, and they would both sit on my lap, and we'd go around the neighborhood and just see what there was to see and chat and do that sort of thing. So, right away, as soon as I could, I started doing at least that sort of thing with them.
Mm-hmm. So ways to connect with them, even though there was a lot of other things going on at that time.
Right. Yeah. And it was really important too, we moved to the suburbs where there's sidewalks and curb cuts and bus routes and all of that sort of thing. So it was real important that my mobility was really maximized. Having the bus stop right by the house was awesome. And my kids thought riding the bus was super fun. And their friends wanted to come, can we go ride the bus? We're going to go do something with my dad. Can we ride the bus? So that was great. Not anymore. It's not that way.
So not cool.
The bus is not cool anymore, but when they were 7 and 8, yeah, it was awesome to ride the bus. But yeah, having that, maximizing my mobility in the neighborhood, and also in the house, it was something my wife wanted me to mention, was she's very big on, you know, it's really important to do more than just get Dad in the house. Dad has to be able to go everywhere in the house and get into the kids' rooms and get into all the family rooms and into eat with the family. And, you know, it's real important that I need to be able to go everywhere in the house so that I can be part of the family that way as well. So it's not just, you know, what can I do? It's where can I go in our own home. Right. And she's always been really big on, you know, setting up our house to look like, so I can be in the house everywhere, and so that it doesn't look like a hospital ward, so it looks like a home. She's always very big on that. She didn't want a hospital bed sitting in the middle of the living room with rails and, you know, a lift and all this medical equipment. She was very, very determined to make it look like a house, like anybody else. So she thought that was important as part of family and family life as well.
Do you feel like that has kind of helped your kids just view you as, you know, Dad's in a wheelchair, but there's nothing really wrong with him?
Yeah, I think it all helps, but I would agree with Clark. I can't think of a time when the kids ever were embarrassed or or the fact that I was in a chair was anything more than just a practical reality of, well, we need curb cuts and we need a ramp and Dad can't drive. But other than that, they were always really helpful. They're still very helpful. You know, when we go out, and we still go out, and you know, they have to get the food and they have to set me up so I can eat. And if I drop stuff, they still have to pick it up, and they hold the doors open for me most of the time, except when they'd forget.
Until they forget, yeah.
But generally, they're pretty good about being helpful. And I try to minimize what I ask for, not to be overly burdensome, but, you know, I also, on the other hand, a good one is we've got a dog, and I walk the dog around our neighborhood by myself. I just put the leash around my elbow, and the dog goes with me. But when the dog poos, I get on the phone, I call my kids, and I say, and it's called a poo report. And my wife will pick up the phone, and she'll go, which one do you want? And I go, it's Audrey's turn. And Audrey gets on the phone and goes, yeah. I go, okay, I'm here, come get it. And I either wait for it or trust them to come soon enough. But I try to do laps around the block until the dog poos, so it's close at hand. But yeah, poo reports.
That's great. And you try and stick within a distance they're willing to come.
Well, yeah, I try to. We basically have a square block.
Yeah.
It's a round block, so I just go round and round. So it's usually within a couple of blocks.
Right.
And then after the dog poos, then I'll take off and go a couple miles away and come back.
Right.
But yeah, I try to keep pre-poop and post-poop close at hand.
That's awesome. I love it. That's great. So they don't seem to be impacted at all about your injury.
No.
What do you think is the thing that, you know, for you has been hardest in terms of parenting? I mean, it sounds like you kind of figured out pretty quickly how to reconnect with them. What are the things that you feel like have been harder?
Well, it is definitely, I mean, they're girls, they're not terribly athletic, but they've tried their hands at softball and soccer and baseball, all that stuff. And yeah, I'm not able to do it, and it's frustrating. And it's even just simple things like, well, you know, it's their sports and just doing handyman stuff around the house. I take them outside and I'm like, pop the hood, that's the dipstick, get a paper towel, wipe it off, get a quart of oil, that's the fill hole. So I'm teaching them how to check the oil. But I can't show them, but to me it's still important enough. You know, my kids are going to know how to at least check their oil and their tire pressure and at least know where all the vital fluids are on the vehicle. So, but I have to do all of that by voice. And that can be really, really frustrating. It's really hard to describe things by voice when it's twisting and turning and moving this way and that. And but that's a skill that I've had to learn as well as part of my injury. But again, I think probably the hardest part is, not being able to do the sports and be part of it. And, there's still this place, I can't get out in the backyard. I can, but it's rough and it's down the ramp and it's uneven and I get stuck in the wet grass and my wheels get all dirty. So it's not easy for me to get out and about outside all the time like I'd like, especially in Seattle wet weather. But yeah, I think the hardest part is just not being able to do a lot of the physical things that most people do.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, I think everything else is pretty much the same as any other parent would do it.
Now, you mentioned that you made this big move from Southern California up to Seattle area. Was that prompted by family? What kind of help did you have? You mentioned that you had a lot of au pairs and nannies and things, but did you have family help too?
We did. My brother's wife's family are all contractors, so they did the basic accessibility remodel on the house, built the ramps, redid the shower, bathroom area so I could get in. They helped a little bit with the child care when we first moved here. They were all a big help when we were still down in California. All of my family flew out from different parts. Everybody, my wife's family, my family, each took turns coming to stay with us. We had friends take the girls for a week. So yeah, we have definitely, again, had to rely on anybody and everybody to try to cover that. I was injured, and I did my recovery at Desert Regional in Palm Springs, and they have a attached residence for families of folks that are in the ICU, and that was immensely helpful that my wife and my daughters could come down and just have a place to stay that was right across the street while I was in ICU learning how to breathe again. So yeah, that was another thing that was just really helpful from a family standpoint, was having just that residence at hand, because our house was 2 hours away from the hospital, and my wife was still having to go back and forth a lot. But knowing that my family was there was a huge, both our families were there, was a huge help when I was recovering.
So you and your wife, it sounds like roles kind of had to change a bit once you had your injury to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, we were always very much a team though, so, whatever it was, we would figure out a way to make it work. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, we got the au pair, we got nannies, we just did whatever we could to get the child care covered and get the transportation and all of it covered as much as possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, she continued to work, and I, did as much as I could.
Do you feel like it changed kind of how you two parented together? It sounds like you always were a team. Do you feel like that changed it at all, or was it still just the same kind of team approach?
I think it was a lot the same. I mean, I'm still the dad, and she's still mom, and they still go to her for comfort, and I bark and they jump, but they still come to me too. So, I mean, yeah, I think we pretty much fit into our typical roles as husband and wife and mother and father. So I think, again, that much is in a lot of ways the same. I can't think of any really tangible ways now that being in a wheelchair makes any difference other than just practical day-to-day stuff. But as far as my relationship with my kids or as a family member, yeah, we've got plenty of other problems with just having kids and raising them and dealing with everything we have to deal with. And the fact that I'm in a chair is not even on the radar compared to the rest of it.
Right.
So I guess that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. So Becca, Jared, so this was not your plan to come into the hospital to give birth, and you were planning to go home, and how long were you planning to take off?
A week?
Yeah, I think a week was what he was going to take off. I was going to take maybe 8-10 weeks off.
Yeah. So how long did you end up taking off, Jared?
2 months.
2 months.
Yeah.
And Becca?
I am retired now. I never went back.
So instead of going back in 10 weeks, you now are stay-at-home mom.
Yes.
Yeah. So can you guys talk a little bit about what that was like to kind of have given birth to brand new first baby and then have a spinal cord injury?
It was definitely hard. It was, Anthony went home with Jared's parents from the hospital because I was obviously going to be there for a long time. And, it was that second day I was injured and he wasn't ready to leave me alone there yet. So he stayed full-time in the hospital with me for the first week. And, our baby was just off with grandparents.
I was going to say,
yeah.
It wasn't just off.
Yeah, it was off with the grandparents.
Yeah.
So we quickly got comfortable with someone else watching our kids, which is incredibly helpful because I have so many able-bodied friends who wouldn't leave their kids with anyone until they were a year or 2 years. And I thought, man, you're missing out on a night alone without the children around. It's definitely nice to have that resource and to have someone else to help you. So, and then I stayed in the hospital for about a month, and Jared would bring the baby in every day to see me. And but Jared was the caretaker. I wasn't really doing anything at that point. And then I came home at a month, and we kind of, for the next month, worked through things together at home until he really felt like, I was safe, basically, to take care of Anthony all day and to handle things. And yeah.
When you were on inpatient rehab, did they kind of help you to figure out any of that, or did anybody really kind of know to direct specific techniques? Or
I wouldn't say they had a lot of techniques. I think it was as new to them as it was to us. They don't get a lot of brand new moms in there.
Yeah.
It's not typically the scenario.
No.
So there weren't really a ton of techniques, but they did put me in touch with a couple of different people who'd had kids and different resources.
Did you actually reach out to those folks?
A little bit, and I think, I don't know, for us, I think it was more like trial and error. That's kind of how we really felt like we needed to figure things out. We decided very early on we didn't want to live our lives any differently than we would have planned on living our lives, and so we just wanted to go about it and kind of incorporate this into parenting and everything else, the same way we would have.
So what do you feel like has been for you the biggest things that you've noticed that feel very different than what you anticipated, I guess? Because
I think the day-to-day at this point, because my kids are 2 and 5 still, so it's still just the exhausting day-to-day activities. And, just things like getting them in and out of their cribs was a whole new challenge. Like, how am I going to change diapers at home was a challenge. When they're little and Jared's at work, like, how am I going to get them up and down off the floor during the day? In and out of the car seat. With Anthony, I didn't drive with him in the car until he was a year old because I wasn't comfortable yet with any sort of core strength to get him in and out of the car. With Liv, it was a different case, and she was just, it's a lot easier with the second one for sure. I think because I wasn't learning the wheelchair and the parenting at the same time.
Right.
So it's easier having them separate. I think if you already have the wheelchair thing down, it's a lot easier to go, okay, now how are we going to problem solve? Because there's a way to do it all and to get them up and down off the floor. There's always a way it can be done.
Right. So Jared, what was that like for you to go to the hospital thinking that you're coming home with your wife and new baby? And
I don't know. It's tough. It's been 5 years, so when I look back on it, I don't really. Maybe I'm glossing over the difficult parts of it, but I only really remember a couple key points. One of them was when she was taken into surgery to get the tumor removed. We were all sitting in the room, and it was kind of empty because they'd taken the bed out, and someone had gotten fast food, and we were all sitting there, and I just remember it being really quiet. Because at that point, we didn't really know what we were dealing with. If after the surgery, the feeling would come back and it would be a somewhat temporarily, couple weeks thing. But we didn't realize until obviously after the surgery, and then a few days after that, they're like, yeah, nothing's really going on here. So then we kind of transitioned there again into what the next stage is to figure out on a more permanent basis. We still didn't know if it was going to be months or if it was going to be forever. So we just kind of had to plan for what we were going to do with the baby. So when she was at the UW for 3 weeks, when she was doing her physical therapy during the day, I was at home getting things ready at the house, take the kids up there every night, and then I think on the weekends, Anthony stayed in there with us, right? Yeah. In the hospital room. So I was trying to make it as normal as possible for her and get as much time with the kid because she obviously wasn't seeing him very often at all. Right. So that's kind of a couple of the key points right around that first fresh memories.
So do you feel like you guys just kind of worked out, I mean, it sounds like you kind of just problem solved together how to do all the things. You had to build your confidence quickly. And I would imagine you had to get confident in her pretty quickly.
Yeah, it was weird because obviously she just had surgery, both on her back and then C-section as well. And then getting the core strength down doesn't come quickly. And then like when you first see her kind of holding the baby, you're like, are you going to drop him? So that was kind of nerve-wracking. And then it's like, how is she going to get over into the crib to get him out? And I'm thinking, okay, do we have to cut the crib and I could create a gate and put some hinges on it so that she could, because it was a wooden one, so it wouldn't be that big of a deal to fix. But that's just kind of the problem-solving stuff that we had to go through. And we obviously had all the occupational therapists and stuff come into the house. And they were helpful to an extent, but like I said, they don't deal with many people, new moms, with that type of injury. So we kind of just had them focus on what you would tell someone that didn't have a kid, and we kind of worked on the stuff with Anthony just kind of by ourselves. So yeah, it's just taking each individual item and seeing how you could get around it. Because there is a way. I mean, it took her a while to get into driving. That's probably one thing that we would, if someone was asking for advice, we'd probably say, hey, get that going a little bit sooner than we did, just because it's the independence, obviously. I wouldn't want to be stuck home for a year without driving. I know she didn't. So I would say get that thing going as quickly as possible.
Yeah. That's definitely a key factor.
Yes.
So how long did it take you to feel pretty confident with being at home?
Gosh. I mean, I think it took me a long time. It probably took me a good year to feel like I really had some concept of what I was doing every day. I would carry Anthony like on a boppy pillow on my lap around the house. And I mean, probably 4 or 5 times he fell off of that onto the floor. It was like, I definitely didn't have this mastered.
Right.
And he's fine now. So kids are resilient, thank goodness. But I mean, he definitely got experimented on. So, yeah. So it definitely took some time to feel like I really, and even when I would first drive, it was terrifying to me because it was like, well, what if my car catches on fire? And here I like broke my wheelchair down and it's in the passenger seat. And like I have to put that back together and then get around to the other side to get Anthony out. I mean, just things like that. I thought there's so many things that could happen here.
Right. So you go to the worst case scenario.
Right. So immediately I think of that and I think, what would I do? So
yeah, absolutely. Did you plan right? I mean, like when you guys were talking about kids before you got pregnant, did you talk about how many kids you thought you might want?
I always wanted 5, but Jared was never on board with that. So.
Really? Not on board with the 5?
She was 4 or 5 and I was 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So somewhat close.
We wanted a lot of kids.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we wanted a big family.
So after your injury and coming home and kind of learning about Anthony, how long was it before you started saying, maybe we could think about having a second child?
I mean, the first year it was absolutely not. We're never having another child.
So you told everybody.
Yeah,
"No,
we're not
this is
having
it."
any more.
I don't know if we told anyone. I mean, I'm sure no one really even asked at that
Right.
point.
Yeah.
But the conversation between us was like, this is, it's so much work, it's too hard, not going to happen. Yeah. And I think when he got close to 2, right?
Probably, yeah, because they're only 3 years apart, so it would have been close to that time.
That's when he really, at 2, I felt like he was a lot more independent. He listened to me a little bit better. It was so much easier to take him grocery shopping with me when he was 2. So then I was like, oh, maybe I could do this again. I forgot about that whole baby phase.
And I don't know if it's more telling or if it's common with couples where one is in a wheelchair, but she was more willing to have a second one than I was. We both wanted it, but she was, I think it probably would have taken me a lot longer to get there. She wanted it sooner rather than later. So I don't
Did
know
she
if that,
have to kind of convince you that it was the good idea?
probably, yeah. I mean, I'm sure I had a lot of questions that I said, well, what about this and that and all that, but
What were your concerns?
I mean, just having a newborn in addition to, I mean, Anthony was a great kid and he listened well, but he was still only going to be 3 when the kid was born. So it's dealing with a toddler and then also a newborn again, and it's just how many variables can you throw into the mix and then still, handle it. I mean, she did a great job, but that was probably one of my main concerns.
Yeah.
That and my health was a concern for him too. He was like,
Yeah,
should we do this again?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I glossed over like the biggest point was. So I mean, what's going to happen? Are you going to be able to feel it? Like, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that could
just
go
the
wrong in a
logistics
normal
of-
pregnancy, and then if you can't feel some of that stuff, where you could maybe react to it and go to the hospital and get it taken care of or whatever. So that was probably the biggest concern is for both her health-wise and then the baby health-wise when she was pregnant.
How about being pregnant and then having a toddler too?
It was exhausting. I had, with my first, I didn't have any complications or issues at all. And then with Liv, I'm very independent and I like to do everything myself. And so I would still when I was pregnant with Liv, I would throw Anthony in the shopping cart and go, to Costco and fill up my cart and was pushing it myself. And I had to quit that pretty early on because that was causing some contractions. And I think just, I was using a lot more core strength to do, take the wheelchair apart and stuff like that. And that would cause contractions. So I had to kind of lay off a few things and relax a little bit. So it was hard. I mean, I didn't want to ask for someone to help me go to Costco, but I thought, well, for goodness sakes, I'm pregnant in a wheelchair. I guess someone can push the cart for me. So
you finally gave in a little
I
and
did
were
give
willing
in,
to do
yeah.
that. Now, did you have any issues? I mean, one of the things you're concerned about is how about managing another child? Did you ever have any of the concerns, the safety concerns, or Anthony running off or anything?
Definitely. I got a leash for him when we would go in public because it got to the point if you go to the mall, they have all those ramps. Well, I mean, he could kill me on those ramps. He'd be out of there and I'd still be going, trying to catch up to him. So I got a leash so that I could kind of control him when I was out in public. And then when we were at home, our first house had, 10 stairs down to the backyard probably.
Yeah.
So, and I could go out and around and it would take me forever to get back there.
Right.
But, so that was a little bit hard. He would go out there when he was 2.5 and I would sit out there on the deck and watch him, but I couldn't make him come back in the house. So I'd be like, hey, coax him in with candy. I don't know, whatever I could do, come inside. And there was, I couldn't get him to clean up his toys. There was plenty of stuff like that that I couldn't get him to do. And we had one area of our house that was a raised entry so I couldn't get to that area. And he quickly learned when he was younger, that's where he would go if he wanted to get away from me. Because it was Mom can't get me up here. But every other area of the house was accessible for me. And I think, like Joe said, I think that's very important that you're, that everything is, you can go everywhere, you can be everywhere, you can be in their room for bedtime stories, you can be wherever the kids are.
Yeah. So adding the second one to the mix, was it what you thought it would be, or was it better than you thought it would be?
I took 5 weeks off with the second one. and I don't really remember anything going wrong or anything like that. Or, I mean, she'd been through it already once. This time, she obviously just didn't have to deal with the whole, how am I going to work in this wheelchair thing, and could just worry about the baby. And our first one, he was really good. I mean, he was at 3. I mean, you could tell him to do stuff, and he would do it. You could say, hey, go get a bottle, and he'd get a bottle for her. So that worked out really well. And he was a great sleeper as well. And the second one wasn't as good as the first, but as long as you got one somewhat stable child, and you can worry about the next one, then it's easier when there's 2 of us and one baby really just to worry about. So the second one, I mean, nothing wheelchair-wise that comes into play. Just raising a kid, it poses all the challenges.
Yeah. I think the difference for me with the second one was, I think with Anthony, Jared got up with him in the middle of the night because I was still so newly injured. But with Liv, I got up in the middle of the night because he was back to work and I was at home. And, you know, I mean, it just takes more time. Like it's hard enough to be a parent and get up in the middle of the night and go get your child, but then you have to transfer a couple times into the chair, out of the chair, back into bed. You know, so you're like wide awake at 2 in the morning because you just did all these transfers, and it's, you know, it's a slower process than it is. Yeah.
Anything you feel like has been hard about it with the spinal cord injury that, you know, these guys both talked about, kind of being able to be out playing with their kids in a different way?
Yeah.
How about for you? Have you?
I think I really, at this point, I really missed being able to play on the floor with them. I wanted to do that when they were little, just like get on the floor in their face and, you know, hang out. And I did a little bit of that. Like we kind of tried to troubleshoot through that, and I would put toys on the bed and then get on the bed with the kids so that I could kind of be on their level with them. But it's, you know, it's still a process, and it's a slow process to like go get the toys and go get the baby and transfer onto the bed. It's not as easy as just like, oh, I'm on the floor and now I'm up again. So it's just slower. Yeah. But I miss just being able to do stuff like that. Just go run around.
Did you learn to transfer down to the floor or not from your wheelchair?
Kind of. I'm just not strong enough. I need to work on it more. I mean, it takes me a good 10 minutes to do it, so it's not something I want to do unless I fall out of my chair and I have to. Yeah. So stuff like that. But we still do. I mean, like I play tag with Anthony, and he thinks it's no different. I just chase him in a wheelchair, and obviously not in the grass. We do it on the hardwoods inside or out in the street. But yeah, so I would say I send her a lot more of my play in the driveway and in the street, just because it's so much easier for me to get around. So, but I have a freewheel. That's great for a manual wheelchair that you can get around in the grass with the kids. It's definitely not as fast as walking and running, but at least I use it like when I go to his baseball games and stuff like that. So I can get out there and be out there and do the same stuff.
So you're not really noticing anything. How about for you? Do you feel like there's things that you feel like her spinal cord injury has impacted?
No, I mean, I'm a decently positive guy. I don't think anyone would say I'm happy-go-lucky. But I think you got to look on the positive side in that no one can ever tell you what would happen if she wasn't in the wheelchair, but I would envision we would both be working, right? Only because of the finances of raising 2 kids and then living in this area, decently expensive. But now that she isn't working and I'm working, she's able to stay home with the kids, which is our preference, to have her stay home with the kids. So I think if you look at the bright side is that she's now getting more time with the kids than she would had that not happen. And rather than having a caretaker with the kids more time than not, I mean, it's her. And selfishly looking at it from my perspective, right? I mean, 9 out of 10 times when I come home from work, dinner's already ready. Whereas, honestly, if we were both working, then it'd be like, okay, who's going to cook, you or me? So I think if you look on the bright side, she gets to stay home with the kids. It's easier for me as well. So there's a lot of good things that have come out of a bad situation.
Yeah. I think it just requires more planning on our part, you know, for vacations or whatever it is. Yeah. We just have to really think about it more ahead of time.
So you mentioned some discrepancy on how many kids. Are you thinking about another child?
We are thinking about another child, yes.
And how are you on this one?
I'm on board. I'm on board. Yep.
So you're on board.
Yeah.
A little easier.
I'll be
not
there
gonna
for the
force
third
him.
kid.
You'll participate in that?
Yeah.
Absolutely. There you go. Absolutely. So it sounds like you guys had help too. So you had family around that were able to kind of help and.
Yeah, both of our families. I grew up in Auburn, lived there my whole life. So my brother and sister and their families are still here, and my parents. And then her brother and mom moved over, I think, shortly after that. They were just on the east side of the state, but now everyone lives over here.
So that's great. So
Yeah, they've been a great help. I mean, I didn't really see Anthony much that first week he was born because he was off with either his aunts or uncles or grandma and grandpas. And then having them take him out for a night or, anything. Or stopping by, like in the first couple weeks after I went back to work with Anthony, they'd stop by and help out around the house and clean or whatever and just take care of the baby while Becca did whatever she wanted.
Which I think is beneficial, whether you're in a wheelchair or not, as a new mom, just to have the family around.
Absolutely. I think everybody probably feels that way with new, probably Joe, even when your kids were tiny, it was nice to have the family visit and jump in and take care and all of that.
That's more of a parenting thing than a wheelchair thing, right?
Absolutely. You guys have all talked about all the different ways that you've connected with your kids. Do you feel like it's any different than any other parent? I don't know, Clark, what do you think?
I really don't. I think that, you mentioned, and I didn't bring it up, like story time and stuff like that, and get into every room in the house. I mean, all of those things are just critical that, we had a split level house, so I had a stair lift put in so that I could get downstairs because that was kind of the rec room. So we made sure that I could get there too. And then my son, when my daughter was born, then he, which was a huge transition for him, all of a sudden had to be downstairs. So I spent a lot of time downstairs when he was 6, 7, 8 years old because everyone else was upstairs. And that was a big move for him at that age. So, and then again, just the reading of the stories, all that. It's just what parents do. Right. And so you're just able to do it, even as a quad, you can still do those things. So if there's anything I've heard from other people, other friends of ours, that they think our kids are real sensitive. And so whether that comes from just, being around us and that's just the way things are, or what, I'm not sure. And I also think that, as Joe mentioned, they're very helpful, and they've just kind of, and yet at the same time, it gets to be that age where, okay, now it's time to stop asking them to do some of those things too, because, you cross the line where they don't always want to have to be dad's helper. And I got my own little life at 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 16 that I need to be doing. So there's that too. But no, I don't. I think it's at a point it's just kind of normal parenting that, and you start. There's everybody. It doesn't matter who you are. You start thinking, yeah, I remember when my parents used to talk about these things at this age and what we went through, and you do the same thing. Yeah.
So that's interesting. You think that the kids that you've gotten feedback from other parents about them being kind of more sensitive to others, maybe more empathic a little bit with others, and also more helpful, more willing to step in.
Yeah, and nothing that we really noticed or thought of, but if they brought it up, you go, I guess so.
You're used to them. They're like that. Yeah. So is it you as a parent, or is it the disability, or some combo?
And it can always be both. I mean, we're both parents that came from you help around the house. So we're parents that say, you clean your room or you take your dishes to the counter. I mean, so they've learned that early on. And that wasn't just because I wasn't able to do it very well. It's just that everyone helps in the family. Yeah. So, and you'd be surprised how many are out there that just kind of do everything for their kids. So there's that kind of thing too.
Yeah. How about you, Joe? Any other ideas on kind of connecting with your kids or?
Well, I was just thinking, listening to Clark, that, I mean, my kids complain about all kinds of stuff that they have to do, but they don't complain about the stuff they have to do for me really too much at all, which is kind of surprising when I think about it. I mean, when I ask for stuff, they pretty much do it. I mean, they might groan or hesitate a little bit, but they generally do it pretty willingly. But if it's, you know, do a load of laundry or take out the trash, you know, then you get the full onslaught. But, so yeah, I mean, they've been, you know, for whatever reason, yeah, they've just adapted to the things that I help Dad with. That's just run of the mill. I almost feel kind of bad about this now, but I think about it. I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but when they were younger, probably, you know, from 3, 4, 5, 6 on, we used to have them empty my leg bag for me because they could. But then after a while, it's like, you know, my wife was more like, we really shouldn't have them be emptying your leg bag. That's not something they need to be doing. So they can do it, but we could have them do that.
Right.
But that just kind of was part of it. It was like, you know what, you guys get the physical ability to do it. It's handy and it's helpful and it needs to be done. And so they were doing that for a few years until we decided, well, we'll skip that. Yeah. But that kind of just, points out that, they will pretty much mostly do, you know, just the simple things I need and help out with. So I think, and again, I don't know if that makes them more empathic or kind-hearted, or if it's just kind of become, that's the norm in our house. And I think that probably is it. You know, we do things and we haven't, that's probably a big part of just adjusting to an injury in general, is establishing that new norm about every aspect of your life, including your kids and your relationship with your spouse and your neighbors and your transportation and your own health. You know, it's figuring out how to make it all work together again, and then you just start moving forward with it as it is. And what you're missing, you don't really miss anymore so much because you figured out a way around it.
Yeah, absolutely. How about you, Becca? Do you feel like there's any other ways that you kind of connect with your kids that's any different because of your spinal cord injury?
I mean, well, certainly they're on my lap all the time, and that's still, my 5-year-old will still get on my lap to ride around. And I mean, I think it's special in that your kids are so close to you all the time. You know, it would be great to be able to carry your kid all the time, but as a parent, you're exhausted. You can't possibly hold a baby all the time. But I can have a kid on my lap all day long, and it doesn't bother me at all. And so, so I've gotten used to, you know, doing dishes with kids on my lap and whatever. And I mean, but it's fun because they're always there with you, and I think that is a great way for them to connect. And I mean, the same thing as these two gentlemen said too. I agree with everything they've said. I think I definitely think my kids are very considerate. And I mean, I see Anthony wanting to help with things all the time. You know, he'll put my leg back on if he sees that it's spasmed off, or just things like that. And I don't even ask him. He just he does it, or he does things for me that he sees his dad do. Or if Jared's picking me up off the floor, Anthony grabs my feet because he wants to help with the transfer. So they're just considerate in that way, and he's always opening the door for me. And I mean, I think that is special because I think that is somewhat missing from our world. It's just people being considerate of other people, and so I think it's great to see that he's always thinking about other people,
which is wonderful.
Yeah, it is. And I think I've noticed too, with like if I have my niece or my nephew on my lap, they're so wobbly, and they're the same age as my kids, but my kids are just like little bricks on there, and I think they just got it down, like they got their core strength down very quickly, and so now I can zoom around and up and down hills, and they're not falling off, but I would never go up or down a hill with my niece or nephew because I'm sure they would just
topple right over.
Yeah. So, and
that's funny. I see both these guys nodding, like, oh yeah.
Our kids other kids are just like, yeah.
They wanted to be up there, but they got up there and they're like,
like jello all of a sudden. Yeah.
I mean, I real early on taught my kids to drive my chair, and I get my nieces and nephews to drive my chair. I turn the speed down, and we literally would put cones down, And I'd be going, oh, you got that one, you know, and they run over it or they try to go around. So whatever, you know, let them drive the chair. And I love, you know, just a few weeks ago, some 3-4-year-old little boy, just his eyes are all wide open when I go rolling by. And, you know, and they're just so innocent. And they're just like, why are you in a chair? What kind of chair is that? And they're just fascinated by it. So they don't, you know, when they're that young, it means it's just all part of the world to them. And the curiosity is fun. And I've gone my kids' school classes, elementary school classes a few times. And, you know, the kids they're just curious, you know, and yeah, they just want to know. And they don't even think, you know, they can't relate to, well, how did hurting your neck mean your legs don't work? You know, that doesn't make any sense. But yeah, I think kids are probably a lot more adaptable than the grown-ups are about a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, they always have, great, funny questions, you know, the kids at Anthony's school, why are your legs purple? You know, like they're not afraid to ask you why are you in that wheelchair? Can I use it for a little bit now? And I'm like, no, I'm not just doing this for fun. But but to them, it's a normal part of life. To my kids, it's like, that's all they've ever known. So this is normal. And, you know, they sit on my lap and go, wee, and, you know, it's just, that's all they've known.
That's great.
Do you have anything to add?
I would just echo the adaptability of the kids. I mean, if anyone is in a chair and thinking about having kids, I mean, I wouldn't worry about them saying, oh, what's the kid going to think about my wheelchair? And the answer is they're not going to. The only thing they'll say is to their kids just in passing, oh, yeah, my mom's in a chair, and they won't even think about it. I mean, just with the physical ability of them to sit on there, I mean, that's adapting in a physical nature, but then mentally also they don't see it as any sort of hindrance that maybe adults through their years have baggage about it themselves.
And we'll go somewhere, and Anthony will yell, Mom, the ramp's over here. I mean, you know, it's just, they're adaptable.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So I'm going to ask each of you, what advice would you give to somebody who's thinking about having a baby or almost ready to have a baby? Clark.
Do it. No reason not to. I mean, the adaptability, you figure ways out to make it work. Yeah, there's just no reason not to.
Even with the struggles.
Yeah, oh yeah.
It's going to be a struggle either way.
Yeah.
It's going to be a struggle.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't think of any major reason other than to figure it out and make a plan, but nothing distinctly going to stop you from doing it, that being in a wheelchair.
I guess that would be the only thing, is to say that you will plan more.
Yeah.
But you do that in general, you know, you mentioned going on vacation or all those things. In a chair, you just have to plan more anyway.
Yep.
Because the world is made for the 95% or whoever, 99% of people who walk around. So how to raise a child, or the products that are out there that way too, they're designed for that as well. So you just have to plan and adapt and figure it out. And most of it's figuring out as you go, and I think every parent does that in a lot of ways. We just have to do a little bit more.
Other advice, Joe?
Well, I was just thinking about my teenage daughter now, and just how do kids relate to it. And, you know, again, it's the same sort of thing. My teenage daughter is horribly embarrassed, you know, at times by her parents, and that we won't say something ridiculous or embarrassing when her friends are over. So she's very aware of her the socialization at her age. She's 14 now, is huge. She's all worried about how she looks, her friends, but when she brings friends over, the fact that I'm in a chair is not even on her radar at all. So she, you know, of all the things she'll be embarrassed about, the fact that her dad's in a chair doesn't even register. And she'll bring a new friend in the house, and they're gone and into her room before, you know, they barely even acknowledge I exist. So, which is what you get. So I guess that's a good thing.
Right.
So even at her hyper embarrassable age, the wheelchair doesn't make a difference, I don't think. So even it's not even just the 2 and the 3-year-olds. It just continues to be the norm as they grow older.
Jared, what about you? What kind of advice would you give?
I would say just accept the help of people. So I think I remember when Anthony was first born, I was in the house doing something, and my parents were over, and the grass was long, and I see my dad mowing it. I'm like, why the hell's my dad mowing my lawn? And I mean, I was busy doing other stuff. I don't know if it was putting in a grab bar in the bathroom for Becca or what. And it's something that I would never have asked him to do, but he did it because he was over there. So I would just say if people offer, or even if they don't offer, I would say, hey, ask them to do something because they want to do it, and they'll probably more hesitant to say, hey, can I do this? Because they don't want to make you feel like you can't, even though it was my lawn and I wasn't the one in the wheelchair, but there was other stuff that I had to do. So I would just say, ask them for something.
I think my advice would be communication with you and your partner. I mean, for me, I think that's key. I had to be able to talk through like whatever issue we were having as far as like, okay, troubleshooting, like how am I going to do this with the baby? How am I going to do this? And so I think just always talking about things with your partner, because, you know, even you're in a chair, you're kind of in your own little world and you have your own thoughts, and no one else really knows exactly what that's like. And you can't shut your partner out of that, of thinking like, you know, it was, so I would always go to Jared and say, okay, you know, I want to be able to do this with Anthony, so how are we going to do that? And so I think that's the number one thing, is just communicate about what you need and figure out a way to do everything, because everything is possible, I think.
Absolutely. Other questions? I'll give everybody else a couple minutes. Any questions from the audience? So the question was about, you know, how did you kind of explain your spinal cord injury to your kids, and how do you kind of address the issues of kind of bowel programs and bladder management? You know, you mentioned that your kids kind of helped that earlier, but they might not have even realized what they were really doing, maybe.
I think they did. It was going in the toilet, so I think they knew what it was.
They kind of understood that.
What it was, and the color matched.
Yeah. And I'm going to just assume that you haven't had a lengthy discussion yet with your children about
So
spinal
my kids are in the bathroom with me in the mornings for my bowel program, whether I want them there or not.
Yeah.
Like,
I
I try to kick them out, but they're like, you know, they're 5 and 2, so they're in the bathroom with me. But I mean, it's all normal. They've never seen anything different, so I don't think they've never asked anything about it. You know, Anthony, especially in public restrooms, obviously I have to take the kids in with me. So, gosh, the other day I was in there and he was like, Mom, where's your straw? And I was like, oh, that's what you think this is. Like, he doesn't, but it's just normal to him.
Yeah.
So, and he's just recently started asking questions about why I'm in a wheelchair, and I'll, you know, explain the tumor. And he's just like, okay, and he moves on.
Yeah.
So, and he doesn't remember it the next day, basically. So, so I haven't had any lengthy discussions about that.
Yeah. Joe, how about you?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. I mean, I have a caregiver who comes in every other night for my bowel program and shower and shave. And, you know, we've never actually talked about it, meaning, you know, my kids just sort of know, they figure it out. They know, well, Dad goes to the bathroom sometime. But, you know, we've never bothered to explain it to them. I think they figured it out. They know, and I don't know, in a weird way, it's just not something we ever really needed to talk about. But they know that, you know, there's a woman that we hire for my caregiver to do this stuff and help me with my bowel program, give me a shower. But, you know, we just close the door and we take care of what needs to be done. So again, it's I don't know, it's just part of the new normal, and it's part of the routine. And, you know, it's just like you close the door any other time you need your privacy, you do the same thing. So I guess as far as all the bodily functions, you know, if they ask, we'd tell them, but I don't think they'd ask. They're not going to ask you normally, you know.
Right.
I don't know if I'm making any sense on all this, but
Yeah.
And then as far as explaining the injury, I don't really remember how that happened. I'm sure kids absorb what they absorb bit by bit, and and over time, they'll come to know more and have a better understanding for it. I don't think it was any bigger difficulty to explain a spinal cord injury than it is to explain what makes the car go around the block. So, and they don't care much about that either. So
They just need to. They just need a
know that
ride.
it does.
They don't care how that gets there.
So I don't think, again, like I said, I've gone to my daughter's classes when they were, I think it was 3rd grade maybe, and they're just all wide-eyed. You try to explain it as best you can. You try to make analogies that, if you have a telephone cord and it gets cut, you can't hear the signal anymore, but that doesn't make any sense to them either. And they just want to know.
Telephones have cords?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what kids would think today,
They're
right?
way out there.
So,
So Joe, you mentioned, which I didn't ask about, so with caregivers, how do your kids feel about, because I would assume that over the number of years you've been injured, you've had 1 or 2 or maybe a lot more come through.
yeah.
Have they ever gotten connected with your caregivers, or is it really that person that comes in is dad's person and they don't really interact with them very much?
No, for us, that is a little tough. I mean, it's not been terribly problematic, but we have had caregivers who become friends, and they are part of the family to an extent, because they're there at 7 o'clock in the morning when we have morning caregivers, and they're there every other night on a consistent basis. And the kids do, to some extent, depending on the individual caregiver, get attached and form a bond with them. And they miss them. Some of them we keep in touch with after they leave. Some we don't. It just depends. But it's definitely disruptive. I mean, unfortunately, my wife and I will go through the process of hiring a new caregiver and forget to tell the kids until suddenly this strange person shows up at 7 o'clock in the morning, knocking on the door or walking in. It's like, oh, we hired a new caregiver. Forgot. We didn't tell you. So it's a little, just another thing we need to remember to keep the kids appraised of. I think that's it does kind of add to the unsettledness, unfortunately, is just having different people in and out and coming and going and here for a few months and then gone. And I think that is definitely a little bit of instability that would be nice to eliminate. But I think a lot of it's just something my wife and I have to be better about, is keeping the kids apprised, and the kids will be just, a lot of times they're like, oh, really? Why do they have to leave? I like her so much. Or they'll be like, oh yeah, I'm glad she's gone. I didn't like her anyway. So it just all depends.
Normal kids.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But that, I think it'd be nice if that little bit of it wasn't the way it was.
So Clark, how about your kids? Did they ask about the spinal cord injury, or did you talk about that? Bowel and bladder issues?
Eventually they asked about it, and again, it's kind of like Joe said, you try to explain to them when they're young, and or I've gone and talked to my kids' school, and did you break your leg? No, I didn't break my leg. It's up here, and they, like Joe said, they don't understand that. But then they get older and they get into health class or something, then they start kind of getting a little idea, and they really, okay, that's what really happens, and they know what happened. I dove in a river, so they know. They ask eventually, well, why are you in a chair? As far as personal care, we kept that pretty private, and they're not involved in any of that, and they know that there's a long day and a short day. Which day is it, Dad? Are we going to get up and go early today, or is this going to be later day? So that kind of thing. And as far as, I'm fairly independent, so getting, doing showers and bowel programs, they just know that door shut to Dad's bedroom, so, to our bedroom, that they're not going to come in that time, or they'll knock and say what's going on. And so they become, it's a routine, and they get pretty normalized to it fairly quickly. Yeah.
Other questions? Are there any products that you found or created or invented that made it easier to care for babies?
Might have to give that one to Becca,
Yeah.
because I think she's probably
I'm up on the products. So I used a boppy when the baby was really little, which is like a U-shaped pillow. So I could put that on my lap. And that was before our kids had any sort of head control, so they couldn't sit up. And that was helpful. I would just lay them there. And that was before they were like rolling over and things like that. And then once they had like some head control and could move around a little bit, I would use something called a wriggle wrap, which is almost like it attaches to like a fanny pack would, and it's made for like converting a regular chair like this into a high chair, so you could, then it snaps around your child, and it's just fabric, and then they could sit in this chair and not fall out. So I would just snap that onto myself, and I used that for probably like 9 months, with each child, because then it was, before they were like stable enough to know what was going on and know like I shouldn't just topple over here. And so it would kind of keep them on my lap, and that was invaluable. And then I would use the normal like slings and things like that, but that can be kind of hard depending on like your core strength, and but I would always use the wriggle wrap for everything. So that was definitely good. I think that's all.
Yeah, nothing else comes to mind that was really revolutionary.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you were looking at ways to modify the crib initially.
Yep.
Did you end up modifying anything, or did you end up just figuring out?
Not on the crib. I mean, it adjusts, but
The mattress height adjusts.
The mattress height
Yeah.
does. So we just had that at the highest when the baby was the youngest and wasn't in danger of falling out, and then just moved it down. But then once it's down further and the kid is heavier, it's obviously more difficult for Becca to put her arm in there and throw him out. But I mean, she eventually got used to that and was able to.
I would lay a blanket down in the crib too. Like when I was ready to get them out, I'd put a blanket down and put the baby on the blanket, because then I could like fold the corners of the blanket together and like lift that out with my hand rather than, and that was with Anthony. With Liv, I didn't have to do that because I was a lot stronger then, but so that I'd be picking up
You
the
could have some
blanket,
leverage.
yeah, and have some leverage versus like the wobbly baby. So.
And I mean, as the kid gets a little bit older, and they don't have to be too old, I mean, a little bit over a year, I mean, they'll start reaching for you. And it's a big help rather than just being dead weight. So they can do their part as well.
Yeah. And I would do the same thing on the floor, put the blanket down, and then have the baby on the blanket, so then I could pick it up, versus, because I still can't like bend over with two hands and pick something up. So then I could one-handed pick the baby up if I had the blanket.
Cool. Any other products or
No, we just used a regular dresser for a changing table, and I changed the baby like here, so I just
off
kind
to
of
the side?
scoot up to it, so I don't have anything that I pull under there.
Yeah.
I would use at home when they were really little and I still wasn't comfortable bending over. I would have what is that, like the play mat? I don't know what it's called, but the play mat, but I would put it on the table in the dining room instead of having it on the floor. And that was before they were
So one
rolling
of
and
those
stuff
that
like
has
that.
like the
It's got fish or whatever going over
Right.
the top of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
they
like
lay
they're
on their
looking at
back
it,
and they
yeah.
look at it.
Yeah, and so I would have that on the table, and I would stay there at the table, and but that way at least they were getting like their floor time that they needed, and I could still reach them.
easy access. Yeah.
I wasn't really a fan of that one,
No,
since
he
they were up on the table without sides on it.
Yeah.
But
So
I mean,
you only did that when he was at work.
depends on how
Exactly.
much devoted tension you're putting to it, and it'll be
Right.
fine as long as you're watching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't go far.